I hired a man to destroy me. It sounds insane when I say it out loud, but it felt like the only logical choice. I needed someone to make me feel everything, so I could finally feel nothing at all. I thought if I could control the heartbreak, schedule the abandonment, then maybe, just maybe, it would stop hurting forever. But the plan, it didn't account for him. And it didn't account for the one thing I'd locked away so deep I'd forgotten I had it. It didn't account for my hope. My world was built on polished marble and perfect lies. Los Angeles, Bel Air. My parents' dinner parties were theaters, and every marriage was a performance. I learned the script early. Love was a transaction, a merger, a strategic alliance. By the time I was 22, and the boy I thought I loved traded our secrets for a leg up at his father's firm, my theory was confirmed. Love was just the pretty wrapping paper on a box full of knives, so I built a life that was clean, successful, isolated. My condo had a view of the city that stretched for miles, and it was so quiet. Just try, Sophia. My mother's voice was a sharp sigh on the phone. You're not getting any younger. Find a nice man from a good family. Let us set you up. I didn't want a nice man. I wanted a final solution. I didn't find Ethan in some high-end service. I found him in a rundown cafe off Santa Monica, nursing a single coffee for 3 hours, a stack of worn-out play scripts beside him. His eyes held that particular desperation of someone whose dreams were about to be evicted along with his body. I saw it. The hunger. The need. It made him perfect. I offered him a deal, my voice as cold as the stainless steel table between us. I will pay you a significant amount of money. Your job is not to pretend to be my boyfriend. Your job is to make me fall in love with you. He blinked, a faint, confused smile touching his lips. That's a new one. And then, I continued, the words tasting like acid. You leave, you break it off, completely, devastatingly. You make sure I never want to love anyone again. The smile died. He stared at me, and for a second, I saw not an actor, but a human being looking at something broken. Why would you want that? My reasons are my own. Do you want the job or not? He looked out the window at his beat-up sedan, packed with his life. I saw the war in his jaw. Pride versus survival. Survival won. He nodded. He was good. Of course he was. He had the script, the one I'd basically written. The romantic gestures weren't grand. They were precise. A single sunflower left on my desk because I'd mentioned offhand I liked them as a kid, remembering how I took my coffee. His listening had a focused intensity, his eyes never leaving my face. But I was better. I was the critic watching the play. I noted every cue, every line delivery. Ah, that's the vulnerable sharing scene. This is the protector moment. I waited for the feelings to rise on schedule. They didn't. Instead, something else happened. He started seeing me. Not Sophia Reynolds, the heiress with the armor, but the woman who jolted awake at 3 a.m., heart-hammering, from dreams of being left in silent rooms. The woman who'd panic if a conversation lulled, rushing to fill the silence before it could swallow us. The way I'd flinch, just slightly, at unexpected touches. One night, we were on my balcony, the city a blanket of stars below. A comfortable quiet had settled, and for once I didn't rush to break it. I just breathed. You're afraid of being abandoned, he said softly. It wasn't a question. The statement was so simple, so devastatingly accurate, it stole the air from my lungs. I didn't deny it. I just looked at him, and in the low light, his performer's charm was gone, replaced by a terrible, gentle understanding. That was the first crack in my plan. He stopped acting. I started feeling. The night it all burned down was at my parents' estate. Another perfect party. Ethan was playing his part flawlessly. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, needing a moment away from the champagne and chatter. Their voices floated up from my father's study below, the door slightly ajar. "It's the betrayal in college," my mother said, her tone clinical. It shattered her ability to trust. "She's emotionally fractured." "Love ruined her," my father replied, a note of finality in his voice. Fractured. Ruined. The words pinned me to the spot. They were talking about me like a failed investment, a flawed product. I turned, and Ethan was there. He'd heard it all. The script called for him to take my hand, to offer a comforting lie. Instead, he just looked at me, and his face held a pain so real it mirrored my own. We drove back to my place in a silence that screamed. I could feel the end looming, the planned abandonment. He was supposed to leave tonight, the final act. He followed me inside. The door clicked shut. "Say it," I whispered, my back to him, bracing for the blade. "Give me the line. Tell me it's not working, that you've met someone else, that you're leaving. Do your job." I heard him take a shaky breath. "I can't." 2 words. They didn't fit the script. I turned. His eyes were red-rimmed, raw. All the actor's grace was gone. This was a man coming apart. "The job was to make you fall, and then leave," he said, his voice breaking. "But the truth is, I fell, and I can't leave you, not like this." The world tilted. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, harsh and disbelieving. "What?" "I was paid to break your heart, Sophia," he said, the confession ripping out of him. "But I can't. I care about you. You, not the job, not the money." The laughter died, replaced by a tidal wave of nausea. The truth didn't feel like a liberation. It felt like the ultimate betrayal. Not because of the lie, but because for the first time in a decade, with him, I had felt safe. And that safety had been a paid performance. The one real thing I'd felt was built on the fakest foundation possible. "Get out." The words were ice. "Sophia, please. Get out." He left. The door closed quieter than it should have. And the heartbreak. It wasn't the clean, surgical severance I'd paid for. It was a messy, brutal, chaotic explosion. He had broken my heart. Just not in the way either of us had planned. The weeks that followed were a gray haze. I functioned, I worked, I breathed, but I was back in the silent, polished tomb of my life. The immunity I'd wanted? I had it. I felt nothing. It was worse. Then I saw a flyer in a coffee shop, a tiny black box theater in North Hollywood, a new play. His name was in the cast list. I don't know what drove me to go. Maybe to see the actor at work one last time. To remind myself it was all a trick. I sat in the back row. The theater smelled of dust and old velvet. He came on stage. And there was no trace of the man who'd sat in my balcony silence. This was someone else, raw and powerful and alive. He wasn't performing for me. He was just performing for the love of it. And I cried. Not the silent, pretty tears of movie scenes. This was ugly, silent, heaving sobs I stuffed into my fist. I cried for the little girl who believed in sunflowers. I cried for the woman who built walls instead of bridges. I cried because his truth on that stage was more real than anything in my gilded world. The play ended. The applause faded. The audience trickled out. I waited in the shadows by the stage door. He came out, shrugging on a worn jacket, his face still smudged with stage makeup. He saw me, stopped dead. The exhaustion on his face deepened into a wary, profound sadness. We looked at each other across the empty alley. No money between us, no contract, no lies. Just the wreckage and the quiet. My voice, when it came, was scraped raw from crying. "This time," I started, each word a leap into the void. "If you're going to love me, don't leave." He didn't move for a lifetime. Then a tear traced through the makeup on his cheek. He gave me a smile, small and real and trembling. "This time," he whispered, the sound carrying across the space between us. "I'm staying. For free." That night in the alley wasn't an ending. It was a beginning made of broken glass. We had to walk back over every shard carefully. He didn't come home with me. That word, home, it wasn't ready for him yet. I drove back to my silent condo alone. He went back to his tiny borrowed room. We started from zero, from coffee in broad daylight, in the same rundown cafe where it all began. The first time he reached for my hand across the table, I flinched. Not from him, but from the echo. Was this part of a new act? A kinder, slower con? He saw it. He pulled his hand back and just waited. He didn't apologize. He didn't look hurt. He just let the moment be what it was. That meant more than any touch. That was the real work, the unscripting. He had to stop being a performer. I had to stop being a critic. We had to become terrible, awkward amateurs at being real. I told him everything. Not the polished, I was wronged story, but the ugly, shameful details. The way the betrayal in college made me feel small and stupid. The way my parents' icy marriage felt like a preview of my own life. The nightmares where everyone I loved just turned and walked away, their faces blank. He listened, not like a therapist, not like a performer hitting his mark, just listened. And then, haltingly, he told me his truths. The shame of the struggle, of taking my deal. The fear that he was, at his core, a fraud. The quiet dreams he was almost too afraid to whisper, about writing his own plays, about building something that wasn't just a performance. We started building a new language, one without subtext or hidden cues. That felt too much like a line from the old script, I'd say, my voice tight. "Okay," he'd reply, nodding. "Let me try again, more boring this time." And he'd rephrase something beautiful into something clumsy and true. I learned to love the clumsy. He moved out of his car, then out of his friend's room, into a small apartment with a leaky faucet. I helped him paint it. I got paint on my jeans, the kind that never comes out. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor. It was the most normal, extraordinary night of my life. My parents found out, of course. There was a tense lunch at the club. "So," my father said, eyeing Ethan's simple button-down shirt. "Ethan, what are your prospects?" Ethan didn't try to perform. He didn't inflate his resume. He set his fork down. "My current prospect, sir, is earning your daughter's trust every single day. It's the most important role I'll ever have." The table went silent. My mother stared. My father cleared his throat, disarmed. I felt a laugh rise in my chest, bright and clear. For the first time, I didn't stifle it. The real test came months later. Ethan got his break, a supporting role in a decent indie film shooting on location in New Mexico for 6 weeks. It was everything he'd worked for. The old terror seized me in the middle of the night, cold and familiar. This is it. The clean exit. The polite, career-driven goodbye. The morning he left, I drove him to the airport. My hands were clenched on the steering wheel. We stood at the curb, the chaos of departures swirling around us. "I'll call when I land," he said. I nodded, my throat too tight for words. The old script screamed in my head. This is where he leaves. He cupped my face, his thumbs brushing my cheeks. His eyes held no drama, no performative sadness, just a steady, quiet certainty. "Sophia," he said, "I am coming back. This is not an exit. This is just a scene change." It was the perfect line. And for the first time, I knew it wasn't a line at all. Those 6 weeks were agony, and they were healing. We talked every night, sometimes about nothing, sometimes about the deep, dark fears that crept in with the distance. The silence on the phone wasn't something to panic over anymore. It was just us, breathing together, 1,000 miles apart. The day he returned, I didn't wait at the airport. I waited in his tiny, painted apartment. I heard his key in the lock. He came in, dropped his bag, looking tired and windswept and real. He saw me. He didn't sweep me into a dramatic kiss. He just walked over, wrapped his arms around me, and buried his face in my hair. He took a deep, shuddering breath, like he'd been holding it for weeks. "I'm home," he murmured. And I finally understood what that word could mean. It's been 2 years. We live in a small house with a yard that's mostly weeds, but there's a sunflower that grows wild by the fence. Ethan writes his plays in the spare room. I run my own consulting firm, one built on transparency, not tactics. My parents are adjusting. They see the peace in me, the quiet. They don't always understand it, but they can't argue with it. Last week, we were at that same cafe, our spot. The afternoon sun was streaming in, turning the dust motes into gold. We were talking about maybe getting a dog, a messy, chaotic, loving dog. I looked at him, really looked, at the faint lines by his eyes that come from real laughter, not from hitting a light mark, at his hands, which hold mine not as a gesture, but as an anchor. "You know," I said, my voice casual, "you never did finish the original job." He raised an eyebrow, a smile playing on his lips. "Oh? Yeah. You were hired to make me fall in love with you so you could leave and break me forever." I took a sip of my coffee. "You only half succeeded." He reached across the table. This time, I didn't flinch. I met his hand halfway. Our fingers laced together, a familiar, perfect fit. "I did make you fall in love with me," he said, his tone playful, but his eyes dead serious. "You did," I admitted. "And I did break you," he whispered. "I broke you open." He was right. He broke open the shell I'd built around my heart. He let the light in. He let the air in. He let the messy, terrifying, beautiful possibility of a real love in. The man I hired to give me a final, controlled heartbreak ended up giving me a beginning I never dared to script. And every single day, without a contract, without a single line to rehearse, he chooses to stay, for free.